Hi everyone. Let's take a look at the sample outline together. So you'll notice that I'm not particularly picky about the format in which your outline is in. As long as all the information is there, you can set it up however you'd like. For ease, I just use bullet points for myself. So this is an outline that came before the sample research paper that I posted for you. So let's take a look. So first, in my introduction, I estimated that it would probably be about half a page. And in my introduction, I need to explain the context of what my argument will be and the scope. What exactly am I looking at? So I note that Macbeth is considered to be a cursed play, but it's also super popular, and that I'm curious about why that might be. Now, I make a claim here that even though it's considered cursed, it's very popular. If you make a claim, you need to back it up with evidence, so I needed to include a citation here. Even though I'm not using the specific language, the fact came from this article, Performance History, so I need to be sure to cite my source, and I found it on page 55. So while the play is often understood as being about violence and ambition, I actually think a better reading is guilt. So as we kind of reviewed this week, a thesis statement is something that is specific, arguable, and reasonable. So I can't make a very kind of reasonable argument, let's say that my cell phone is see-through. It empirically is not. There's kind of no reason to make that argument. So the thesis statement that I came up with here is while Macbeth is commonly understood as a blood-soaked play about bottomless ambition, I think it is better understood as a play about guilt. I suggest that the tragedy of this play is about something larger than regicide, which is another way to say the killing of a king. It's about confronting or ignoring guilt. So here I've made a specific, arguable statement that while generally people understand it as being about ambition, I actually think it's about guilt. And here are the reasons why. So in this paper, I'm going to look at 3 adaptations of Macbeth that I think kind of highlight this element of guilt. So these are my signposts, also sometimes called a roadmap. I'm literally listing what kind of big 3 pieces of evidence I'm going to be focusing on in my paper. This is helpful because now the reader isn't kind of wondering what comes next or how all the pieces fit together. Right from the jump, I've explained, this is what I'm going to do in this paper. These are the 3 body paragraphs. So let's take a look at body paragraph 1. So just like my roadmap, I'm going to go in that exact same order. So the first play I'm looking at is a play called Lady Macbeth. I estimate that my first body paragraph will probably be about a page, I would think. So first I'm just going to describe this 1998 production of Lady Macbeth and make those explicit connections to guilt. So again, I have some kind of notes for myself, and you'll notice that I have a direct quotation here. This really stood out to me in my research, so I, instead of kind of rifling through papers or looking through my sources, I've pulled out all the important pieces and put them in my outline already for me. The other thing I want to point out is you'll notice that in my citation, I don't include a page number. That is because this article comes from a website. You'll notice .org, which lets me know that it's probably more reliable. So since it's from a website, there is no standard page numbers. So when I'm citing from it, I'm just going to use the author's last name. Here we are, Tae-Suk. So I mentioned that this version focuses on Lady Macbeth's obsession with guilt. It was super experimental. And that I also have another source here. So this scholar Im writes an article about Lady Macbeth from the perspective of the audience. It's super helpful because it helps me kind of consider how the audience reacted to it, and it also gave me some moments of dialogue from the play, which was very helpful. As an example, I'm kind of summarizing and using a little snippet of quotation here in that pure self. And you'll notice I have the author's last name, and here I do have a page number because this is from an article. While I found it online, it was basically like a scan of the PDF so I could see each of those pages. And here, even though again, there are no one else's words but mine, the information came from somewhere, so I need to be sure to cite where that came from. Then I'm going to end this paragraph with a very direct connection right back to my thesis. We're always pushing that argument forward. So I connect the lasting popularity of this play to its focus on guilt. Body paragraph 2 takes a look at something called the Macbeth Project. Again, I estimated probably about a page here. So here, I have something a little different in that I have two authors. So this source has two authors. Let's take a look down here. Where are these two women? So I need to be sure that when I cite it, I include both of them. You can either use an ampersand or say and. That's kind of up to you. Now, if I cite from these authors again, which I will, this is my only source about this particular project, I don't need to include their last names again. The implication is, if I've already cited from a source and then I have only page numbers following that, that tells you that I'm still using the same source. Now, if I was using multiple sources and switching back and forth, let's say, then I would need to use those last names each time just to clarify who exactly I'm summarizing, paraphrasing, or quoting. And again, making that connection, right? This was all about, there were three major themes, one of which was guilt, and that it was very successful. So you'll notice some of my little kind of outline is not a full sentence. It's just quick notes for myself. The most helpful element for me is that I've pulled those quotations and those paraphrases that I'm pretty sure I'm going to use. This is just going to make the writing process a little more streamlined, a little easier. So my third and final paragraph is about a movie called Mickey B. Came out in 2006, and it is from a maximum security prison in Northern Ireland, and was created exclusively by inmates of that prison. So here you'll notice I mention again that the entire production was created by inmates, and I cite my source. Because this isn't my information, right? I didn't magically know this on my own. It's not kind of general common knowledge. I need to give credit to where the information came from, even though the words are my own. In this case, it was from Roman Ray's article. Okay. One thing I wanted to point out is sometimes in an article or your source, they might quote someone else. So this can get kind of confusing, like, well, who do I cite then? So even though in this case the words come from these two gentlemen, Sam McLean and Jason Thompson, because I found it inside Ray's article, that's what I need to cite. Because Sam and Jason don't have anything for me to cite, right? They're just inside this article. So you can think of it as kind of pointing us to the container, which then we can break apart and find all those smaller elements. And again, you'll notice my final piece here, right? I'm coming back to that idea of guilt because I want to explicitly connect the dots every time I can back to my main thesis, which is making this argument that this is about guilt. Finally, I have my conclusion. I'd estimate maybe half a page. So a conclusion can go in two different directions. It can summarize what has come before and tie everything up, or it can suggest what research, or we would call it a call to action, what work should come next. For this paper, I think the thing that makes the most sense is kind of summarizing and tying everything up under that larger theme of guilt. This is my last chance to really hit my point home to the reader and insist that my reading is correct. However, let's say I was writing a paper on single-use plastic. So maybe I would use my conclusion to say, okay, now that you've learned about single-use plastic and why to not use it, here are some possible alternatives, like instead of using plastic straws, buy a metal or a bamboo straw. So you'll note that I run through everything again. So while these three productions created very different final products, Lady Macbeth, The Macbeth Project, and Mickey B, so those signposts again, all dissect the role of guilt in the play. So I'm returning to the claim I made and again, quickly running through everything I just told you. So here I have a one-sentence kind of wrap-up or summary of what I wrote about in my body paragraphs. And then as my kind of rough draft final sentence right now, Macbeth can be simplified as a violent tale of endless ambition, or, as these three productions suggest, Macbeth can be treated as a study of guilt and offer solutions that break the cycle of violence. I've also included, more for my own organization, my works cited page. The one thing I want to point out here is a small formatting thing that's kind of, well, it's all a little arbitrary. So your first line will be the whole line, Every line after that, you need to bump it over by just hitting the tab key. This is so when I quickly look through, I can tell which pieces all go together, because otherwise, if this was just one big block of text, it'd be really difficult to read. So I hope this helped kind of clarify what your outline should look like and the usefulness of the outline. If you have any questions, of course, let me know.